The rain struck the windows like a desperate hand trying to claw its way in. Thunder rolled across the sky, echoing over the cliffs of Eastport, Maine, where the sprawling estate of Grayson Reed stood like a monument to silence and isolation. The mansion loomed above the Atlantic like a fortress, 4 stories of old stone, steel gray glass, and emotional barricades built from betrayal. Inside, Grayson stood alone in the study, holding a tumbler of whiskey between long calloused fingers. The storm outside matched the one he had spent 15 years cultivating inside himself. Lightning lit the darkened room, flashing across shelves of first editions and curated modernist sculptures. The sea hissed and roared somewhere beyond the tree line, but it was the absence of people that filled the house with its real noise. He didn't mind, not anymore. At 45, Grayson Reed had everything most men spent their lives chasing: a wildly successful tech investment firm, properties on both coasts, a wine cellar better stocked than most restaurants, and silence the kind you buy with long fences and longer grudges. He took a sip and stared at the storm. The world outside had grown more distant with each passing year, and he preferred it that way. Solitude was cleaner than company, safer than intimacy. He'd learned that the hard way. Behind him, a gentle knock came at the door. Edith, his housekeeper of over a decade, appeared with her usual quiet grace. "Sir," she said, clasping her hands in front of her waist, "your weekly grocery delivery is en route. The app says they'll be here within 10 minutes. He didn't turn. "Have them leave it at the front door." Edith hesitated. "The storm? That's what they're paid for," he interrupted. His voice was even, cold and final. She gave a soft sigh, like someone who'd stopped arguing years ago and simply cataloged the disappointments. "Yes, Mr. Reed." As she left, Grayson felt the familiar tension return like armor being refastened. Even Edith, who had never once betrayed his trust, felt too close some days, especially on days like this. He glanced at the security monitor embedded in his desk. The screen flickered with gray static before resolving into the image of a small white van approaching the front gates, its wipers fighting a losing battle against the sheets of rain. The vehicle paused at the speaker system, its headlights throwing nervous light onto the wrought iron gate that bore the engraved R of his last name. With a tap on the touchscreen, Grayson opened the gate remotely. He turned away, refocused on a contract draft glowing softly on his laptop, and reached for the decanter. But outside, Imani Walker was gripping the steering wheel of her delivery van like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. She was soaked in sweat and storm water, though most of it came from the faulty heater she'd refused to repair. She was behind on rent, overdue on a term paper, and juggling 3 jobs: diner waitress, bookstore assistant, and on Thursdays, grocery deliveries for local clients who didn't want to get their shoes wet. She'd heard rumors about the mansion, its cold, enigmatic owner, who hadn't been seen in town in over a decade. Some said he was a retired rock star. Others swore he'd murdered someone and was hiding from the law. Imani didn't care. She just wanted to drop the groceries and go home. "Easy in, easy out," she muttered as she turned up the drive. But halfway to the circular roundabout, her van made a strange coughing sound. The dashboard lights flickered. Then silence. The engine was dead. "No, no, no, not now," she groaned, smacking the wheel with an open palm. She turned the key again. Nothing. Not even a whimper. She glanced out through the windshield. The mansion loomed ahead, wrapped in darkness and rain. Her phone showed no signal, and her portable charger was dead. Perfect. Wrapping her coat over the grocery bags to shield them from the downpour, Imani climbed out and made a dash toward the front door, boots splashing through puddles. Her braid was already soaked through by the time she reached the front step. She knocked once. Then again. Inside, Grayson froze. No one knocked. Not in years. Deliveries were always left outside. The few meetings he did have were handled through Edith by appointment and at a secondary office in Portland. The knock came again, louder this time. Annoyed, he marched to the door and opened it, half expecting to see a courier fumbling with plastic crates. Instead, he saw a woman. She stood there in the raincoat, dripping bags clutched to her chest. Her dark curls clung to her cheeks, and her brown eyes held not fear, but frustration. "Mr. Reed," she asked, voice raised over the storm. "I'm Imani from Fresh Cart. I've got your groceries, but my van's dead in your driveway. Can I use your phone to call my boss?" Grayson stared at her for a second too long. The warmth of her eyes, the exhaustion in her voice, the way she looked up at him, as if he were just a person and not a headline, all of it left him momentarily disarmed. "You can leave the groceries," he said flatly. "I'll have someone drive you back." Imani blinked. "No, come in out of the rain. No need a towel." Damn, the rumors were true. You really are made of ice. Grayson stiffened. No one spoke to him that way. No one dared. Except this woman? You can come in, he said abruptly, stepping aside. Imani walked past him without ceremony, dripping water onto the marble floor. Her eyes scanned the grand staircase and chandelier above. Nice place. Bit creepy in a Dracula kind of way. Grayson shut the door behind her. And for the first time in years, he felt the silence in his home break. And he didn't entirely hate it. The warmth of the entryway was stark against the rain-soaked chill that clung to Imani's skin. As she took another step inside, the opulence unfolded before her. Marble floors stretched beneath her boots, a sweeping staircase curved toward a second-floor balcony, and oil paintings adorned the walls like sentries watching from another century. She turned slowly, taking in the space. This house looks like it holds secrets, she murmured, not expecting a reply. Behind her, Grayson Reed remained quiet. He stood near the door he'd just closed, as if second-guessing his own decision to let her in. His jaw was set, posture rigid like a soldier forced into hospitality. Imani turned to him, holding the grocery bags tighter. So, where do you want these? Before Grayson could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. Edith appeared, her tidy bun barely disturbed by the sudden appearance of a drenched stranger in the entryway. Oh, my child, you're soaked through, she exclaimed, hurrying forward. Give me those bags. Come to the kitchen. We'll get you dry and warm. I'm fine, Imani said instinctively, but Edith had already taken the groceries from her hands. Nonsense, your lips are nearly purple. Come. Grayson watched silently as Edith led Imani down the hallway. He should have felt invaded. His routine had just been punctured by someone with dripping boots and sharp opinions, but instead something about the scene tugged at a memory. Not of Sloane or betrayal, but of laughter echoing through a house that didn't feel so cold. He hesitated, then followed. The kitchen was a contradiction to the rest of the mansion, warm, sunlit, even in a storm, and filled with the smell of fresh herbs and aged wood. Edith draped a dry towel over Imani's shoulders and handed her a mug of tea. Imani blew on the steam. You're like a storm response team in pearls, she joked. Edith smiled. Someone has to take care of the place. Mr. Reed certainly won't. Grayson raised an eyebrow as he entered. I'm standing right here, Edith. She looked at him with no hint of apology. And I'm still telling the truth. Imani chuckled behind the rim of her mug. Grayson cleared his throat. You said your van broke down. Yeah, engine just gave up in the driveway. I was hoping to use a phone to call my boss in a tow truck. Unless you've got some magic billionaire app that does that for you. He crossed the room and held out his phone. No magic, just Verizon. She accepted it with a nod. Thanks. I promise I won't order caviar or transfer your offshore accounts. Grayson almost smiled but caught himself before it could form. He listened as she dialed, speaking to her manager in clear, no-nonsense tones. No excuses, no drama. Just facts delivered with the same calm efficiency she'd probably used to keep herself afloat through multiple jobs and late shifts. When she handed the phone back, he looked at her with quiet curiosity. My boss is sending someone, but with the storm, it might be an hour or two, and the tow truck's not coming until tomorrow morning. She sipped the tea. Guess I'm stuck. I'll drive you home, he said. Edith nearly dropped the kettle. Imani blinked. What? You said someone might not be here for hours. I'll take you. She tilted her head, examining him as if searching for the catch. You sure? I mean, don't you have assistants or robots for this sort of thing? I have a car, he replied simply, already heading toward the hallway. Imani looked at Edith, who was staring after him as if he'd just spoken in Latin. Does he do this often? Imani asked. Edith shook her head slowly. He hasn't offered to take anyone anywhere in over a decade. He doesn't even attend staff birthdays. Well, Imani muttered, rising to her feet with the towel still wrapped around her shoulders. Today must be special. 20 minutes later, they were driving through town in a sleek black sedan that still smelled like it had just left the showroom. The windshield wipers swept methodically across the glass, parting the rain like a curtain. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just there. Imani broke it. So is it true, she asked? Grayson kept his eyes on the road. Is what true? That you haven't left that mansion except for work in 15 years. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. People talk too much. That's not a no. He glanced at her, one brow slightly raised. Why does it matter? Just seems lonely, that's all. All that space, that art, the money, and no one to share it with. She looked out the window. Life's too short to spend it locked behind a gate. I'm not hiding, he said quietly. I'm protecting myself. From what? She asked. Happiness. He didn't respond. Imani shook her head. Sorry, that was out of line. I don't even know you. They drove in silence for a moment longer before he spoke again. Where do you live? East Point Commons, Building 2. Grayson nodded and turned down a side street. The apartment complex was modest, clean, and lined with small garden plots by the front walkway. He pulled up to the curb and parked. Imani unbuckled her seatbelt but paused before opening the door. Thanks for the ride, she said, and for not firing me when I called you out. Grayson looked at her, a faint tug at the corner of his mouth. You're welcome. She smiled, then slipped out of the car, dashing through the rain and up the stairs. Grayson waited until she was inside before pulling away. As he drove home, the silence in the car didn't feel quite as heavy. Back at the mansion, Grayson returned to his study but found himself distracted. His laptop screen glowed with numbers, market trends, and contracts, but his mind kept drifting to her. To her soaked curls, her fierce eyes, the unapologetic way she spoke to him, as if he were just a man and not a headline. He stared at the whiskey in his hand. Then he picked up his phone. Fresh cart deliveries, the receptionist answered. I'd like to place an order, Grayson said. Certainly, delivery window. And I'd like the same delivery person as last time, he added. A pause. Of course, sir. That would be Imani Walker. Grayson ended the call and stared out the window again. The storm had begun to clear, but he wasn't thinking about the weather. He was thinking about a door he'd opened for the first time in years, and the woman who'd walked through it without fear. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't entirely sure whether to bolt it shut again or leave it open just a little longer. The next morning broke with soft light filtering through the high windows of the Reed estate, casting golden rays across the cold stone floors. Grayson was already at his desk, fingers steepled under his chin as he reviewed quarterly projections. Yet the usual focus he brought to numbers and percentages was conspicuously absent. His eyes kept drifting to the security feed, though the gates remained quiet, and his mind returned again and again to the way Imani had challenged him the night before. She had been unexpected, direct, unpolished, and utterly unfazed by the world he had wrapped in layers of distance. At exactly 11:30, the motion sensor at the gate lit up on his monitor. A different delivery van this time, older, boxier, and still wearing the scars of last night's breakdown. Grayson leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen. She was here. He stood. Outside, Imani adjusted the rear door of the van with a grunt. It still stuck swollen by moisture and age. The replacement van wasn't much better than the one that had died in his driveway, but it ran, and that was all she could afford. She grabbed the insulated bags and made her way up the steps, pausing before ringing the doorbell. She expected Edith to answer. Maybe Grayson wouldn't even be home. That would be better, safer. But the door swung open before she could reach the button. Grayson stood there. You're back, he said, as if surprised, though he had been watching for 10 minutes. Looks like it. She held up the bags. Grocery drop-off, round 2. Honestly, I figured after yesterday you'd request anyone but me. Grayson took the bags from her hands. His fingers brushed hers briefly, lightly, but it was enough to send a faint jolt through both of them. I don't mind directness, he said. It's rare in my world. Imani raised an eyebrow. Then your world must be incredibly boring. Grayson opened his mouth to reply, but his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, frowned. Excuse me, he said. Business. Of course, she replied, stepping back. Enjoy your groceries, Mr. Reed. She turned to go, but something in him didn't want her to leave. Not yet. Wait. She paused, half-turned toward the van. Would you like to have dinner sometime? The words came out before he had time to rehearse them, to coat them in cool detachment. Imani blinked. Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Reclusive Millionaire? He hesitated. It's just dinner, and call me Grayson. A grin tugged at her lips. Okay, Grayson. Dinner sounds nice, but I should warn you I don't impress easily, and I always speak my mind. I'm counting on it, he replied, and for once didn't regret the vulnerability. They agreed to meet on Friday night. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet restaurant tucked along the harbor, one Grayson had invested in years ago and rarely visited. The reservation was made under an alias just in case. But the moment Imani stepped through the doors, any illusion of anonymity faded. She wore a simple black dress, modest and elegant, her hair pulled back loosely with a few stray curls framing her face. Heads turned not because of the dress or makeup, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, self-possessed, real. Grayson stood from the booth and felt something stir in his chest as she approached. You came, he said, still half surprised. I said I would, she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Though I barely recognized you outside your fortress. You look normal, he chuckled. I try to blend. She said, scanning the menu. Is this the kind of place where the steaks don't have prices listed? Unfortunately, yes. Yikes, these better be life-changing. He found himself smiling genuinely without effort. The waiter appeared, took their order, and left them with wine. Amani sipped her eyes on him. So, are you going to tell me why you really asked me here? Because I'm guessing you don't usually date delivery women. I don't usually date anyone, Grayson said honestly. You're different. You treated me like a person, not a number or a rumor. That's because you are a person, she said matter-of-factly. A grumpy one, but still human. He laughed a dry, rusty sound that surprised them both. It's been a long time since someone called me grumpy to my face. Get used to it, she said smiling. I warned you. Dinner passed quickly. She told him about growing up in a small town, losing her parents while in college, working her way through bills and grief and disappointment. Her dream of becoming a nurse shone through every word. Grayson found himself sharing pieces of his life too, not the financial empires or strategic acquisitions, but quieter things. Moments. He told her about the night his mother taught him how to make tea from scratch, because the power was out and they had no heat. About the old dog he once had who used to sleep in his office chair. You're good at this, Imani said after he finished a story about a childhood fishing trip. At what? Talking without saying anything personal. He tensed slightly. There's not much to tell. I doubt that. She didn't push further. Instead, she let the silence breathe. By the time dessert came, the air between them had shifted, softer, charged. I'll drive you home, Grayson offered as they stepped outside. Imani shook her head. I can take a cab. I know your mansion is in the opposite direction. I insist. He didn't even realize how badly he wanted those extra few minutes with her until they were in the car moving through the quiet city streets. When they arrived at her building, he walked her to the door. I had a good time, she said, turning to face him, which I honestly didn't expect. Neither did I. He hesitated. Would you like to do this again? Imani tilted her head thoughtfully. Yes, but next time, let's go somewhere less curated. I want to see if you can handle a regular place with regular people. Grayson nodded. I'll try. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Just a brush of warmth, but it lit a fire behind his ribs. Good night, Grayson. Good night, Imani. As he walked back to the car, he touched the spot on his cheek where her lips had been. It was the simplest of gestures, and yet it felt like someone had knocked again, not at his front door this time, but somewhere much deeper. And this time he was listening. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Grayson's home office. For once, the light didn't feel intrusive. The shadows didn't cling as heavily to the corners. Something inside him had shifted imperceptibly, but undeniably. He had spent 15 years mastering the art of control, of keeping people out of keeping himself safe. But one dinner, one laugh, one stolen kiss on the cheek had left cracks in the fortress he called a life. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the fact that he had enjoyed it, or the fact that he wanted more. Grayson stared at the untouched coffee on his desk, then pushed away from his chair. He walked into the hallway and found Edith arranging a vase of fresh lilies on the console table by the staircase. Do we have anything in the house worth serving for dinner? He asked without preamble. Edith looked up slowly as if confirming he'd actually said the words. Dinner, are you expecting company, sir? I might be. She set down the flowers carefully. I'll make sure we're ready. He paused. Something simple. No full staff. Just a quiet evening. Understood. She said nothing more, but her faint smile followed him all the way back to his office. Imani didn't expect the text. She was halfway through shelving a stack of children's books at the store when her phone buzzed in her back pocket. Grayson Reed. Would you be available for dinner this week at the house? Something quiet. She stared at the message. Not because she was surprised, though she was, but because of how formal it sounded. Like he was drafting a business contract instead of asking her to dinner. Still, her heart skipped. Imani. Are you asking me over for dinner like a normal person? Or is this an interview for permanent delivery personnel with sarcasm experience? Grayson, both, but mostly dinner. Thursday. Imani works for me. Just tell your house to go easy on me. That chandelier was judging me last time. Grayson, it's been notified. Thursday evening arrived with the scent of rosemary and lemon lingering in the air. Grayson stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, brow furrowed, as he stared at a pan of roasted vegetables that looked slightly too dark around the edges. I thought you said you didn't want staff, Edith remarked from the doorway, amused. But judging by that pan, perhaps you should have reconsidered. I didn't ask you in here to judge, Grayson muttered. No, but I came anyway. She walked over and handed him a clean towel. You have 10 minutes. You may want to check your appearance before she sees what a culinary disaster looks like up close. Grayson glanced at the kitchen clock. He hadn't realized how quickly time had passed. With a nod of thanks, he retreated upstairs to change, leaving Edith to rescue the vegetables. When Imani arrived, she was dressed in jeans, a loose blouse, and a denim jacket that still carried the scent of rain. She had brought a small bottle of wine tucked under her arm and wore an expression of curiosity mixed with caution. Grayson opened the door himself, something that still felt strange. "Hi," she said, lifting the bottle. "Didn't know what pairs with mystery millionaire, so I went with something red and affordable." He stepped aside. "Welcome back. Your house seems less spooky when it's not storming," she said, entering. "Still feels like it eats people, though. I assure you it hasn't eaten anyone in at least 5 years." She smiled, comforting. Grayson led her to the dining room, smaller than the one reserved for formal occasions, cozier, tucked behind the kitchen. Candles flickered gently on the table. A simple salad and pasta dish awaited them. Edith's work subtly polished to resemble something Grayson might have cooked. They sat across from each other. Imani looked around. "Okay, I have to admit I didn't expect pasta. I thought maybe caviar or a steak the size of a laptop. I figured something familiar might be easier." She twirled her fork in the noodles. "You're surprising, Grayson." He raised a brow. "How so?" "You live in a museum, drive a car I'm afraid to breathe near, haven't been seen in public since Bush was in office. And yet here you are, serving pasta and lighting candles." He looked at her for a moment, then spoke softly. "What can I say? I'm full of contradictions." She studied him as she took a bite. "You're good at hiding. You know that." He didn't flinch. "It's a learned skill." "Well," she said, setting her fork down, "I'm not great with mystery novels. I like knowing the plot. So if you're looking for something casual, I'm probably the wrong person." Grayson leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the edge of the table. "What if I'm still figuring out what I'm looking for? Then I hope you figure it out before it's too late." Her tone wasn't sharp, just honest. That was what Grayson had come to expect from her. A clarity that made the air feel thinner, the conversation feel real. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room. Edith brought them coffee and disappeared without a word. They sat on opposite ends of a long couch, the fireplace crackling softly between them. "You said something last time," Grayson said, "about me being lonely. I asked if you were. You never answered." "I was. For a long time. And now?" "He's so want to." He hesitated. "I'm not sure." Imani nodded. "At least that's honest." She stood then, stretching slightly. "I should get going. Early shift tomorrow. I can drive you." "No need. I ordered a car. Don't want you feeling obligated." He stood with her, walking her to the door. The night air was crisp and the gravel driveway sparkled under the moonlight. At the bottom of the steps, her ride idled. But she didn't move just yet. "Tonight was nice," she said. "Less brooding than I expected. I'll try to maintain the standard." Imani tilted her head. "Don't try too hard. Brooding works for you, just maybe smile more often. You have a good one." Then without warning, she leaned in, not for his cheek this time, but a soft, brief kiss on the mouth. A brush of lips warm and certain like punctuation at the end of a sentence. "Good night, Grayson." Before he could answer, she was already in the car, waving from the window. He stood there long after the taillights vanished down the hill. Inside his chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Not fear, not doubt. Hope. And he wasn't sure yet whether that terrified him more than anything else. The next morning, the study smelled faintly of bergamot from the untouched tea Edith had left for him hours ago. Grayson sat at his desk, his gaze resting on a photo frame turned face down in the corner, one that hadn't been upright in over a decade. He didn't touch it. Instead, he opened his laptop, tried to focus on a client acquisition strategy, but the numbers blurred. Imani's kiss lingered like a heat he couldn't shake. He'd meant for dinner to be a gesture, an acknowledgement of something shifting between them. He hadn't expected it to feel like a thread pulled loose in a fabric he'd carefully woven shut. He wasn't used to feeling anything he hadn't already measured. At noon, Edith tapped gently on the door and entered. She carried the mail in a peculiar look that meant something had come she didn't like. "Sir," she said, setting a single envelope on his desk. This was hand-delivered. Grayson frowned. There was no return address, but the handwriting on the front made his chest tighten. He opened it. Inside was a small ivory card embossed with a logo he knew well, Sloan Gallery. Beneath it, a handwritten note in silver ink. "Gabriel, let's not be strangers. Come see what I've built. Opening this Friday, your name is on the list. Sloan?" He stared at the card for a long moment, then dropped it into the trash. Imani's day was a whirlwind of back-to-back deliveries, a spilled latte at the bookstore, and a customer who yelled at her because their croissants had the wrong energy. By the time her shift ended, she was tired enough to skip dinner, but her phone buzzed just as she stepped onto the bus. "Grayson, can I see you tonight?" She hesitated, thumb hovering. "Imani, sure, yours or mine." "Grayson, mine, but no pasta this time. I'll order something decent." "Imani, you're learning." That evening she arrived at the mansion dressed in a soft blue hoodie and leggings, hair pulled back in a low puff. Comfort over presentation. If she was going to see the inner workings of this man, she wanted to show her real self too. Grayson met her at the door, less formal than usual. No jacket, no tie, just a plain gray sweater and jeans. The look suited him more than he probably realized. "Dinner's on the way," he said, stepping aside. "Which one from?" "From where?" "Some Italian place you'll probably tell me is too pretentious." "Let me be the judge of that." They moved to the sitting room where a bottle of red wine was already breathing on the table. Grayson poured her a glass, then one for himself. Imani took a sip, then tilted her head at him. "Okay, not bad. Slightly overcompensating, but I'll allow it." He smiled, one of those small, reluctant ones that almost looked accidental. They sat across from each other on opposite couches. "So," she said, twirling the stem of her glass between her fingers, "you said you were lonely for a long time? Want to tell me why?" Grayson leaned back, the wine glass held loosely in his hand. "It's not a flattering story." "Good, I don't trust people without any unflattering stories." He didn't answer right away. The room settled into stillness, the kind that dares honesty to step forward. "I was engaged once," he said at last. Imani sat forward slightly. "What happened?" "I found her with my brother, the night before the wedding." There was no dramatization in his voice. No bitterness. Just facts laid bare like bones. Imani winced. "Damn." Grayson continued, voice low. "She sued me, claimed half the company, said she helped me build it. She got a payout. She and my brother disappeared. I never saw either of them again." Silence. Imani's fingers traced the rim of her wine glass. "That explains the fortress. It explains the silence. You ever talk to him again?" "No, I didn't see the point." Imani nodded. "I get it. Betrayal like that, it's a wrecking ball. People think it's about the cheating, but it's not. It's about trust being pulverized." He looked at her, eyes searching. "You've been betrayed." She didn't flinch. "By someone who said they'd stay. They didn't." He didn't ask more, and she didn't offer. Instead, she set her glass down and moved to sit beside him on the couch, close enough that her leg brushed his. "I'm not going to pity you," she said, "and I'm not going to promise I'll never hurt you. Nobody can promise that." Grayson nodded slowly. "But I don't play games," she added. "If I say I'm here, I'm here." He looked at her, the air between them suddenly thick with meaning. "Why me?" he asked. "You're light, and I'm dark," she offered, smirking. "That's a little dramatic. I'm not good at this." "You're trying. That counts." He leaned in then slowly, as if waiting for her to stop him. She didn't. Their lips met, not clumsy, not rushed. It was soft, measured, and warm. A kiss with no performance, no script, just two people exploring the beginning of something fragile and brave. When they pulled apart, Grayson rested his forehead against hers. "I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something," he whispered. Imani's voice was steady. "Then step in. You're not alone this time." They sat there in silence, her head resting against his shoulder, the wine forgotten. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and for once Grayson didn't hear it as a warning, but as music. Later, after she left, he returned to the study. He didn't sit. Instead, he walked to the corner, picked up the photo frame he had left face down for years, and turned it over. It was a picture of him and Sloane at the height of their illusion, smiling, perfect, beautifully broken. He set it face up on the desk, not to honor the memory, but to face it. He didn't fear it anymore. He opened a drawer, pulled out the Sloane Gallery invitation, and placed it beside the photo. Not because he planned to go, but because he knew the past was knocking again. And this time he wouldn't answer alone. Grayson stood outside the gallery on a rainy Friday evening, the invitation still folded neatly in the inside pocket of his coat. The Sloane Gallery was sleek, modern, and carved right into the heart of the city's arts district, like a declaration of rebirth. He hadn't intended to come. He had told himself he wouldn't, but curiosity had a way of digging through armor. Through the glass front, he could already see the crowd, tall flutes of champagne, murmured pretension, bold brushstrokes trying too hard to be ironic. But it wasn't the art or the patrons that had drawn him here. It was her, Sloane Whitmore, the woman he had once loved, the woman who had unraveled his life in a single night. The woman who now stood at the center of the gallery laughing lightly as if nothing had ever happened, as if the last 15 years had been a detour instead of destruction. Grayson didn't step inside, not yet. He watched her through the glass, studying the angle of her jaw, the precise flick of her wrist as she adjusted a champagne glass on a pedestal. Every movement was curated, controlled. He was about to leave when she turned directly toward the door. Her eyes met his. Her smile didn't falter. She raised her glass, and with the same grace she'd once used to disarm boardrooms and break hearts, she crossed the gallery floor and opened the front door herself. "Grayson," she said as if tasting the name. "You came after all." He didn't offer a greeting. "You invited me. I wanted to see what your latest game was." "No game," she replied smoothly, stepping aside. "Just art." He entered the gallery but remained by the door. "You always did know how to wrap your intentions in expensive frames." She let the jab pass, still sharp. "I like that." "What do you want, Sloane?" She tilted her head. "Maybe I just wanted to see you. Is that so hard to believe?" He met her gaze unmoved. "Yes." Sloane sighed, turning toward one of the larger canvases. "You know, the last time we stood in front of a painting together, we were choosing one for the study you were building. The one you never finished." He didn't respond. She turned back to him. "Look, I'm not here to relive the past. I've moved on. Richard and I have built something real. The gallery, the collectors, we're serious now. Not just headlines and champagne. Then why send me an invitation? Because whether you like it or not, Grayson, our names are still connected in this city. Your name still sells. Your presence still matters." He gave a low laugh. "So this is about money." She didn't deny it. "It's always been about that with you, hasn't it?" he said, voice quiet but cutting. "Even back then, it wasn't love, it was leverage." "That's not fair," she said. "I did love you, at least for a while." He stepped forward. "And what about my brother? Was that part of the love story too?" For the first time, her composure wavered. "Logan made a mistake. We both did." "You shattered a life," he said flatly. "Not just a relationship, and now you're here pretending it never happened." "I'm not pretending," she said, her voice softening. "I'm surviving, just like you." A long silence fell between them. Then she asked, almost too casually, "Is it true, what they're saying?" "What are they saying now?" "That you've been seen, out, with someone." He didn't answer. Sloane stepped closer, her perfume familiar and unwelcome. "You're letting someone in again." He said nothing. "You think she's different, that she won't see what you are and take advantage of it." He met her eyes, and this time there was no bitterness, only calm. "She already sees what I am. That's the difference." Sloane scoffed. "Everyone has a price, Grayson, even her." He took a step back away from her. "You would think that." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded note. "Just in case she's not as pure as you think," she said, offering it to him. "Some background. You might find it enlightening." He didn't take it. Instead, he looked at her with a quiet certainty. "Keep your shadows, Sloane. I'm not interested in old tricks." She let the note fall to the floor between them, then lifted her chin. "You've changed," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm just no longer interested in being broken." With that, he turned and left the gallery, not bothering to look back. Imani was waiting on the front steps of the mansion when he returned. She wore a knit beanie and fingerless gloves, sipping tea from a travel mug, like she had claimed the entire front porch as her own. He stopped in surprise. "Is it weird that I didn't want to wait for you to text first?" she asked, standing. "No," he said, softening. "It's not weird at all." She studied him. "You went to see her?" "Yes." "And she hasn't changed." Imani nodded. "And you?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I think I'm starting to." She stepped forward, slipping her arms around his waist. He wrapped his arms around her in return, letting the warmth of her presence drive out the last traces of Sloane's perfume from his coat. "Did she try to rattle you?" Imani asked into his chest. "Yes." "Did it work?" "No." She pulled back to look up at him. "Then whatever she said or gave you, throw it away." "I already did." They stood together on the steps while the breeze carried away the last remnants of old chapters. Inside, Edith watched them through the front window, her heart finally settling. Later that night, after Imani had gone, and silence returned to the house, Grayson entered his study. The photo of him and Sloane still sat on the desk. This time, he didn't turn it down. He picked it up, looked at it one last time, and then placed it gently in the drawer. Not to bury it, but to shelve it, where it belonged. In the past, the city's spring festival had always drawn a crowd, streets flooded with families, food trucks lining the park, and laughter echoing off old buildings. It was the kind of event Grayson typically avoided. Too loud, too crowded. too full of lives that didn't intersect with his anymore. But this time was different. He parked several blocks away from the main gate, the valet area already overwhelmed. He adjusted his collar in the rearview mirror and took a breath, the kind that steadied not just the body but something deeper. Imani had asked him to meet her by the eastern entrance at noon. It was now 12:02. She'd be early, he knew that about her by now. As he rounded the bend into the park, he spotted her instantly. She wore a yellow sundress under a denim jacket, her curls loose and blowing gently in the breeze. She was talking to a vendor with a tray of skewered fruit, gesturing animatedly about something. Her presence seemed to ripple through the noise around her, not commanding attention, just creating warmth. Grayson paused for a second, just looking. Then she saw him. Imani waved, her face lighting up like the very festival she'd invited him to. "You came?" He returned her smile a little slower, a little unsure. "I said I would. That's becoming your thing," she teased. "Showing up when it matters." She handed him a fruit skewer, pineapple, strawberry, something dusted in chili powder. "Eat. Trust me, it'll knock that wine cellar palate of yours off its pedestal." He bit into it, eyes widening slightly. "Spicy." "Welcome to flavor," she said, walking ahead and pulling him into the flow of the crowd. For the first 30 minutes, he remained on edge. Every glance felt like a spotlight. He wasn't used to proximity. Someone brushed his elbow. A child shrieked behind him. He flinched more than once. But Imani had a way of grounding people. She navigated the chaos like a seasoned captain, leading him from taco stands to handmade soaps to live acoustic covers beneath a tree-lined amphitheater. She never pulled too hard, never moved too fast, just allowed him space until his shoulders began to loosen. By the time they reached a bench overlooking the pond, he had forgotten to be self-conscious. They sat with cones of pistachio gelato, the sun warming their faces. "You're smiling," Imani observed. "I'm surprised too," he admitted. "Still think people are overrated." He glanced at a group of children skipping rocks nearby. Not all of them. She nudged him with her knee. Progress. They fell into easy silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. Then suddenly Imani stiffened. Grayson followed her gaze. A woman in a cream linen dress and oversized sunglasses was making her way through the crowd, heels clicking sharply despite the grass. She looked impossibly polished for a festival. "Sloan," Imani murmured. He felt his gut tighten. "You know her?" Imani nodded slowly. "She's married to my boss's business partner. I see her at the bookstore sometimes. She doesn't know I'm us." "Should we go?" he asked quietly. "No," Imani said, lifting her chin. "If she sees us, she sees us." But before they could stand, Sloan spotted them. She changed direction, moving directly toward them like a predator with a scent. "Grayson," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise." "Sloan," he replied evenly. Her gaze shifted to Imani. "And you must be Natalie." "Imani," she corrected. "Nice to see you outside the store." "Ah, yes, the bookstore," Sloan said with a mock thoughtful expression. "Such a quaint little place. Richard says it adds character to the block." Grayson stepped slightly in front of Imani, but she didn't shrink. "I didn't expect to see you here," Sloan continued. "You've always preferred quieter company." Imani tilted her head. "And you've always preferred making scenes." Grayson's eyebrows twitched. Imani wasn't backing down. Sloan's smile thinned. "You're quite bold. I find it saves time." There was a long pause. Festival noise buzzed around them, but for a moment the world narrowed to this triangle. Finally, Sloan turned to Grayson. "Well, I'll leave you to your adventure. Enjoy your tacos and trinkets." She walked away, leaving the scent of citrus perfume and arrogance trailing behind her. Grayson exhaled slowly. "You okay?" Imani was still watching Sloan disappear into the crowd. "Yeah, just annoyed. She's not worth it. I know," she said, standing. "But I also know what women like her do when they lose control." "What do you mean?" Imani hesitated. "She came to the store once. Before we had dinner at your house, said some things. Offered money." Grayson turned to her sharply. "She what?" "She offered me a check to leave you alone." I laughed and told her to donate it to charity. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't worth giving her space in your head. I figured if it got worse, I'd say something." He took a moment to absorb the words, and now I think she's calculating her next move. He looked at her, really looked. "I'm sorry." "Fraterno." "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For the weight she brings." Imani reached for his hand. "Grayson, I'm not porcelain. I won't crack. But if she comes at me again, I want you to trust that I can handle it." He squeezed her fingers gently. "I do." That evening, as the sun began to dip below the trees, they found themselves near the main lawn where the fireworks were about to begin. Blankets had already been claimed. Families huddled together under quilts. Teens laughed too loud. Strangers became neighbors if only for an hour. Grayson and Imani found space beneath a sycamore tree. She leaned into his side as the first spark cracked into the sky. He hadn't watched fireworks in years. Each burst illuminated the sky in color blues and whites and sudden oranges. But what caught his attention wasn't the spectacle overhead. It was the reflection of it all in her eyes. The flicker of joy. The unguarded warmth. Imani, he said quietly. She turned. I'm glad you pulled me out of hiding. She smiled. I didn't pull. You followed. I did, he said, and I don't want to stop. The fireworks thundered above, but beneath the noise, something far quieter bloomed between them. Something more powerful than nostalgia or fear. It was the beginning of belief. The next morning brought a calm hush over the city. The sky was still gray from the fireworks smoke of the night before, and the streets bore the faint scent of fried dough and celebration. Grayson stirred his coffee absent-mindedly at the corner cafe, watching raindrops race down the windowpane. Imani sat across from him, sipping from a ceramic mug, with courage tastes like caffeine scrawled across it in faded lettering. They'd met here by her suggestion, a low-key spot tucked behind the main square, half bookstore, half bakery, with mismatched chairs and indie playlists that hum beneath quiet conversations. She liked it for the simplicity. He liked it because she did. They hadn't spoken much since the festival, just small things, how surprisingly good the tacos had been, the guy in the banana suit, breakdancing, the way the fireworks looked from beneath that old sycamore. But something heavier hung in the air now, like clouds threatening to break. I'm glad we came here, Imani said, cradling her mug between both hands. This place has a rhythm. Reminds me life doesn't have to be big to be meaningful. Grayson nodded but didn't speak. She leaned forward slightly. You're quiet. I've been thinking, he said, his voice lower than usual, about how little you know about me. The real parts. Imani smiled faintly. I know more than you think. I want you to know everything, he added. Not just the polished pieces. She set her cup down. Then tell me. Grayson looked out the window for a long moment, collecting words that had gone unsaid for far too long. The night before my wedding, I came home early. I thought I'd surprise her. I brought takeout. She always complained I worked too much, that I didn't know how to be present. I wanted to prove her wrong. Imani didn't interrupt. I found her with my brother. His voice was flat, but his fingers clenched around the coffee cup. In our house. On the couch we picked out together, like I didn't exist. Imani's eyes softened, but she stayed silent, letting him continue. I left without saying a word. Called off the wedding that night. She didn't even chase me. Just sent a lawyer the next day. Claimed she helped build the company. Said I owed her. And the court sided with her, Imani asked softly. Half my company, half my reputation, all of my trust. He let out a bitter chuckle. Logan disappeared. I didn't see him again. Didn't want to. Imani reached across the table and took his hand. Her touch was grounding, steady. You rebuilt everything, she said. Your company, your name, your life. I rebuilt the structure, he replied, not the person inside it. Then let's work on that. Grayson looked at her, genuinely surprised. She squeezed his hand. We don't get to choose our trauma, Grayson, but we do choose what comes next. For a moment, his throat tightened. He hadn't expected compassion without pity. He hadn't expected her to understand without demanding more. You're not what she did to you, Imani added. You're what you chose to become after. Cold shut off. No. She leaned forward, careful, but not incapable. You just forgot how to trust. I'm trying, he said, voice low. She smiled, and that's why we're here. Later, they walked along the river, hands loosely joined. The city buzzed with the quiet activity of a Sunday afternoon dog, walkers, runners, couples clinking coffee cups on benches. I never told anyone that story before, Grayson said, as they paused to watch the water. Not even Edith, she asked. He shook his head. She pieced some of it together. But I've never spoken it out loud. Not like that. Sometimes we carry things so long we forget we're allowed to set them down. He looked at her. You speak like someone who's had to do a lot of setting down. I have, she said. Grief, disappointment, guilt. What guilt? Imani hesitated. My parents died while I was in college. I was supposed to visit them that weekend. I didn't go. I had exams. I stayed behind. He stopped walking. You think that's your fault? I know logically it's not. But logic doesn't cancel emotion. Some days I still wonder if I'd gone, if things might have been different. But that question doesn't help me grow. It just hurts. So I don't feed it. Grayson gently touched her elbow, guiding her to a nearby bench. They sat beneath a willow tree, its branches sweeping low, cocooning them from the rest of the world. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not telling you for sympathy," Imani replied. "Just so you know I get it. The way memory can turn into a cage if you're not careful." He studied her. "And yet you still let people in. Because some people are worth the risk." A silence settled between them again, not heavy this time, but profound. Then Grayson reached into his coat and pulled out a velvet box. Imani's eyes widened. "Whoa, is this about to become a very intense Sunday?" He smirked. "No rings, not yet." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver key. She blinked. "What is that?" "A key to the side entrance," he said. "To the house." Imani stared at him. "Are you serious?" "I'm not asking you to move in," he clarified. "Not unless you want to. But I want you to know that you're welcome. Always." Her fingers hesitated over the key before gently lifting it from the box. "You sure none? He nodded. "You've already opened every door inside me. This one's just symbolic." She smiled, slipping it into her coat pocket. "Guess I better behave, or I'll get banned like a delivery service that leaves eggs cracked." "You were never just a delivery," he said, his tone soft. "You were the interruption I didn't know I needed." Imani leaned in, brushing a kiss against his jaw. "Then let's keep interrupting each other. It's working." They sat there beneath the willow tree, the city moving around them, but time slowing between them. Two people no longer hiding from pain, no longer running from the past, just choosing imperfectly, bravely to keep showing up. The next Saturday arrived wrapped in sunshine and the earthy scent of spring soil. Grayson stood awkwardly on a patch of uneven ground behind a church on the south end of town, watching a group of volunteers in mud-streaked overalls dig holes with enthusiasm that seemed both chaotic and strangely choreographed. Beside him, Imani knelt by a raised bed, her gloved hands busy coaxing seedlings into place. She had insisted he come, not to impress anyone, not to make a statement, just to help, just to be. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for this," Grayson muttered, glancing at a trowel like it might attack him. Imani didn't look up. "It's dirt, Grayson, not a hostile takeover." "That depends on the worms." She laughed her joy, as grounded and rich as the soil between her fingers. "Here," she said, patting a spot beside her. "Try planting these, gently, like you're not interrogating them." He crouched beside her and accepted the tiny plant in her hand. It was fragile green, alive in a way he hadn't been used to for a long time. He dug a small hole, nestled the roots in, and covered them carefully. Imani gave him a thumbs up. "See, you're a natural." "I don't think I've ever touched soil before today." "That explains a lot," she teased, wiping sweat from her brow. Grayson looked around the garden. It was small, just 3 raised beds, a compost bin, and a few sunflowers starting to peek out of the ground. But the energy here was expansive, inclusive. People of all ages milled about, talking, planting, laughing. No one asked him about stocks. No one looked at him like a headline. Here he was, just a man trying not to overwater a basil plant. "How often do you volunteer here?" he asked. "Every other weekend," Imani said. "Started right after my second job ended. I needed something that didn't involve fluorescent lights or rude customers." He smiled. "And this is what keeps you balanced." "That and good coffee." They worked side by side for the better part of an hour. Grayson even forgot for a moment about who he was expected to be, about the glass walls he had built so high they cast shadows over everything. He was pulling weeds from a bed of kale when his phone buzzed. "Caller ID Robert, office." "Excuse me," he said, stepping away. "Take your time," Imani called. "But if you vanish, I'm assigning you compost duty next time." He answered the call. "Robert, sorry to bother you on the weekend, sir, but there's something urgent you should see." "What is it?" "It's about Westland Properties. You know the development on the North Ridge near your estate?" Grayson's stomach tightened. "Yes. There's been an unsolicited offer to buy the entire parcel. Well above market value. It came from Whitmore and Pierce Holdings." His voice went flat. "Sloan and Richard." "Correct?" And Robert hesitated. "Logan's name is on the paperwork, too." Silence. Grayson glanced across the garden where Imani stood holding a watering can, smiling at a little girl who offered her a crooked marigold. "They're making a play," Grayson said. "They want to be close." Again. "What should I do?" "Nothing," he said tightly. "Not yet. I'll handle it." He ended the call and slowly walked back to Imani. She noticed the shift in his energy instantly. "What happened?" "They're trying to buy land next to the house." "Sloan, Richard, Logan." Imani's expression darkened. "You think it's about you? It's always about control with them. They can't stand not having influence. She set down the watering can. What are you going to do? Meet with the board. Block it. And what do you need from me? Grayson looked at her, truly looked. To keep reminding me who I am now, not who I was when I ran. Amani reached up, cupped his face. Then don't run. Fight. But on your terms this time. The following Monday, Grayson stood at the head of a long glass conference table, the city skyline looming behind him like a silent jury. The board of Reed and Stein Holdings murmured in confusion as he passed out a folder to each seat. Inside, a breakdown of the Whitmore and Pierce offer a timeline of events and a personal letter from Grayson himself, something he'd never included before. I know this offer is generous, he said. I know it looks like easy money, but it's not about money. It's about reopening wounds I've spent 15 years sealing shut. One board member, a sharp-eyed woman named Lynn, flipped through the pages. You're saying this is personal? I'm saying it's targeted, strategic. If they own Westland, they own the space that buffers my privacy, my home, and my peace. But they're offering above market. I hold 51% of this company, he interrupted calmly. That gives me the right to reject any offer I believe compromises our integrity or stability. Silence followed. Then Lynn nodded, understood. One by one, the others followed. When the meeting adjourned, Grayson stayed behind, staring out at the skyline. He expected to feel exhausted, angry, but instead he felt clear. For the first time, he wasn't reacting. He was choosing. That evening, he returned home and found Amani in the garden behind the estate. Edith had helped her set up a small space near the trellis, and she was planting herbs with a basket beside her. You're making this place smell like hope, he said from behind her. She turned, smiled. I figured it needed a little life. Something real. Grayson knelt beside her. I turned them down. I know. How? Because you're not the man who hides anymore. He leaned in, kissed her temple. Thank you for reminding me. They sat on the grass as the sun dipped low shadows lengthening across the lawn. Around them, lavender, mint, and thyme slowly claimed the soil. Each root, each leaf, a declaration we are still growing. Even in the places that once only held stone. Grayson had barely stepped into his office the next morning when Robert appeared at the doorway, holding a folded newspaper, with gloved hands as if it might explode. You're going to want to see this, he said grimly. Grayson took the paper and unfolded it. There on the front page of the Metro Insider Lifestyle section was a bold headline. Reclusive billionaire's gold-digging girlfriend. The truth behind the delivery romance. Beneath it, a grainy photo of him and Imani sitting on the bench at the spring festival. They were sharing a gelato, leaning in close. The article's tone was dripping with innuendo and speculation. Sources close to Reed claim concern that his new relationship is part of a calculated plan. Walker, a delivery worker and bookstore clerk, allegedly has a history of seeking out influential men, according to anonymous insiders. Grayson's scan further, jaw tightening. Toward the end of the article, a quote jumped out. Grayson has always been vulnerable to emotionally manipulative women. It's our hope he realizes the pattern before history repeats itself. A close friend of the Reed family. He didn't need confirmation. That quote belonged to Sloan. He set the paper down without a word. I've already spoken to legal, Robert said. We'll draft a demand for retraction and issue a defamation notice. I've also called our PR team. They're monitoring responses. Good, Grayson replied evenly. And find out who gave them the photo. I suspect a private investigator, probably hired weeks ago. Then make sure they know we're not tolerating surveillance either. Push back, hard. Robert hesitated. Sir, should we prepare a statement? Grayson looked up. No, this doesn't go public. I'll speak to the person who matters most first. Amani was waiting for him in the foyer, her face calm but unreadable. The newspaper sat rolled under her arm, already creased and dog-eared. Martha showed me, she said as he approached. I was just about to call you, he said. I'm sorry. Imani held up a hand. Before you apologize, I need to ask you something. He nodded. Do you believe any of it? No, he said without hesitation. Not for a second. She let out a breath, one she had clearly been holding. Then we're fine. He moved closer. I've already started legal action. It'll be retracted. I don't care about the paper, she replied. I care about you and me and us. I can handle being talked about. I've been judged my whole life, but I need to know you won't flinch when they throw stones. I'm not going anywhere, he said, and I won't let them twist who you are. Imani nodded. There's something else you should know. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a check unsigned, but the amount was staggering. Sloan gave this to me, she said. Well offered. I never took it. Grayson stared at it. When, right before that first dinner at your house, she showed up at the bookstore, told me I was a phase, that you were weak, that she was protecting your legacy. His hands curled into fists. Why didn't you tell me then? Because I didn't want to add fuel to your fire. I wanted you to decide who you trusted, not react to her manipulation. He took the check from her and tore it in half, then in quarters. She's trying to control a story that no longer belongs to her, he said. But I won't let her touch what we're building. Imani stepped forward, placing her hands on his chest. Then it's time you told her that, directly. He nodded. I will. That afternoon, Grayson arrived at the new Whitmore and Pierce Gallery unannounced. The staff didn't stop him, whether out of recognition or fear. He didn't care. He walked straight through the main floor past the sculpture garden and found Sloane in her office arranging a bouquet of imported lilies on her desk. She didn't look surprised. Grayson, I figured I'd see you today. You always were good at predictions, not so good at boundaries. Sloane folded her hands in front of her. If this is about the article, it's exactly about the article. Her expression remained neutral. I simply spoke to a journalist. They asked about my opinion. You implied that the woman I care about is manipulating me. You questioned her integrity. You tried to destroy her reputation in front of the entire city. I shared concerns, she said coolly. You've been isolated so long, it's hard to know if you're thinking clearly. He stepped closer. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 15 years. And I see exactly what you're doing. Sloane stood. What exactly am I doing? Trying to rewrite history. Trying to remind me of what you used to be to me. But it's over, Sloane. All of it. I've built something real, and you can't stand that you're not part of it. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. You think that girl actually loves you for who you are? You think she doesn't notice the estate, the cars, the power? She's never asked me for a thing, he said. You did from the very beginning. Sloane's face hardened. You're making a mistake. No, he replied. I made the mistake 15 years ago when I didn't see who you really were. But I see it now, and I'm done. He turned to leave. She called after him. You think this is over? I've got influence, Grayson. You can't shut me out forever. He paused at the door. I don't need to. I just need to stop giving you space in my life. When Grayson returned to the mansion, the first thing he did was find Imani. She was in the garden as always, clipping rosemary with steady hands, her face calm beneath the afternoon sun. He walked to her, placed his hands gently on her waist. I went to see her, he said. And she threatened. I ignored. I told her it was done. Imani studied him. How did it feel? Like the final chapter in a book I should have closed years ago. She smiled, leaning up to kiss his cheek. Welcome back. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by herbs and soil and sunlight. Then Imani pulled back slightly. What now, she asked. Grayson looked around the garden, the house, her. Now, he said, now we grow. The rain had returned with a vengeance, lashing against the mansion's glass panes like it had something to prove. The garden was soaked wind, flattening the rosemary and mint that Imani had carefully nurtured. Thunder cracked the sky open, rumbling like a distant warning. Grayson stared out the window of his study, watching the storm roll in. Something felt off. The tension had been building all week, not just in the weather, but in the silence between phone calls, the glances from Robert, the half-finished emails from legal. After the article, the gossip hadn't stopped. If anything, the press doubled down. Sloane had given more anonymous quotes. Someone had leaked their business filings. Imani's store had received anonymous phone calls, and 2 reporters had shown up under the guise of being customers. Still, Grayson stayed silent for a time. He thought it would die out. But now the world was pressing in. A chime broke his thoughts. His phone buzzed on the desk. Robert, urgent, call me. Now. Grayson picked it up. What's going on? Your car, Robert said. It was followed this morning. We just confirmed it. I had the security footage reviewed from your street, and someone deliberately caused an accident on your route. Grayson's heart sank. An accident. The delivery van that collided with the passenger sedan wasn't random. They cut across 2 lanes, hit the car near your corner, timed to your usual exit schedule. Was anyone hurt? Yes, Robert said, voice grave. It wasn't your car that was hit. It was Imani's. The line went quiet. Grayson's breath caught in his throat. Where is she? General Hospital. She was conscious at the scene, but they kept her overnight for observation. Grayson didn't wait for more. He was already out the door, coat over his arm, car keys in hand. The hospital room was quiet, but sterile in that way only hospitals could be. Machines beeped gently. A television in the corner played muted daytime news. The scent of antiseptic hung thick in the air. Imani lay in the bed, a bandage above her eyebrow, her arm wrapped in a sling. Her curls were messy, flattened on one side, but she was awake, alert. When she saw him, her smile was tired but real. "You didn't have to rush," she whispered. Grayson dropped into the chair beside her and took her hand. "You could have died, but I didn't." He swallowed hard. "I should have had security with you. You don't control everything, Grayson. I should have known they'd escalate. Sloan Richard's someone. You're not responsible for their choices. But I am responsible for putting you in their path." She leaned her head back, eyes drifting to the ceiling tiles. "You once told me you built a house so large no one could touch you inside it. But you invited me in anyway." He looked at her, confused. "That invitation came with risks. I accepted them." Silence passed between them, thick with all the unspoken things, fear, regret, resolve. "Do you want out?" he finally asked. "I'll understand. I'll protect you no matter what." Imani turned her head to look at him. "No, I don't want out. I want truth. I want action. I want to know you're not just going to defend me but stand beside me." "I will," he said without hesitation. "But this can't go on." They crossed a line. She nodded slowly. "Then burn the bridge behind you, Grayson. Close that chapter for real." He did it that night. Grayson called a press conference, his first in over a decade. Cameras packed the conference hall at the Reed and Stain headquarters. Reporters murmured the air electric with anticipation. He stepped up to the podium in a dark suit, no tie sleeves, slightly rolled, less polished, more human. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I've spent much of the past 15 years rebuilding my life in silence. I believe that keeping my distance was the best protection. I was wrong." Clicking cameras. "A few weeks ago, I was the subject of a viral story that speculated about my personal life, my relationship, my judgment. What wasn't discussed was truth. What wasn't valued was privacy or respect or basic humanity." He paused. "The woman I love, Imani, was injured yesterday in what we now believe to be a targeted incident. The matter is under investigation, and I will not speak on those legal specifics. But I will say this: enough is enough. Flashbulbs. I will not allow toxic history to shape my present. I will not allow vindictive voices to define a woman whose only offense was opening my heart." Reporters murmured. Grayson looked directly into the lens of the lead camera. "And if anyone still doubts her integrity, I invite you to look at mine. What she brings into my life cannot be bought, staged, or manipulated. It is not a headline. It is healing. And I will defend it with everything I have." Silence, then thunderous applause. Grayson stepped back from the podium, his chest rising and falling with something close to liberation. When he returned to the hospital that evening, Imani was sitting up in bed watching the replay on the muted TV screen. "Did I go too far?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "You finally went far enough." He smiled a little sheepishly. "I've never done a press conference like that. Pretty sure you just invented a new genre, public declaration, as emotional accountability." He sat beside her again. "I meant every word." "I know." She reached for his hand. "Now let's plan what comes next. Together." Grayson looked around the hospital room, then down at their joined hands. "Let's get you out of here first. Tomorrow," she promised. "They just want to keep an eye on the scans. But I'm fine. Next time," he said, "we take the back roads. Fewer reporters, fewer idiots." Imani laughed. "Next time we walk." And in that moment, in the aftermath of threat and thunder, Grayson felt something he hadn't in years. Clarity. Summer arrived with gentle certainty. The mansion's garden, once a modest patch of neglected earth, had transformed into a lush, living canvas. Lavender swayed with every breeze. Basil grew thick and wild. A tomato vine had taken over half the trellis, stubborn and proud. Life, as it turned out, was persistent. So was love. Imani stood at the edge of the garden, a watering can in one hand and a pair of muddy gloves in the other. The bruises had faded. The sling was gone. Her spirit, though her spirit had never broken. If anything, the storm had made her stand taller. Grayson watched her from the back patio, heart drumming in quiet awe. For all his wealth, power, and influence, nothing humbled him more than the way she spoke to flowers, as if they were friends. He stepped onto the stone path, clearing his throat just enough to get her attention. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing at a patch of stubborn mint. "Don't sass the head gardener," she replied, smirking. "I'll assign you to Snail Patrol again." He held up both hands in mock surrender. "I come in peace." She turned to face him fully. "You've been pacing for the past 10 minutes. Everything okay?" He took a deep breath. "More than okay, just ready." "For what?" Instead of answering, Grayson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. It wasn't the traditional jewelry box. It was soft familiar, the kind you might use to protect something fragile, something personal. He walked over, standing just inches from her now, the scent of lavender and soil wrapped around them like a blanket. "I've been thinking," he began, "about roots." Amani tilted her head. "Botanical or emotional?" "Both," he said. "I built this place to keep people out, to bury pain, to keep moving forward without ever stopping to plant anything real. Then you came along with your books and your jokes and your terrible playlists." She laughed. "Hey, my taste in music is eclectic." He smiled. "You walked in carrying a package and somehow delivered me back to myself." Amani's expression softened, her teasing falling quiet. She watched him closely, heart beginning to race. "I don't want this house without your voice in it. I don't want mornings without your laughter in the kitchen. I don't want another season to pass where I'm wondering if you'll still be here." He opened the pouch and slid a ring out, delicate, simple, a gold band engraved with tiny vines that wrapped around a sapphire like ivy on old stone. "This isn't about fixing the past," he said. "It's about choosing the future. And I want to choose you, over and over, in gardens and storms and everything in between." Imani's eyes welled, her breath caught between a sob and a smile. "Grayson, will you marry me?" For a moment time stood still, not in the way of movies with swelling music or birds conveniently flying overhead, but in the real way, in the way of hearts locking into place, of two people seeing the truth in each other's eyes and knowing it was home. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her all along. Then without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. Deeply, not with ceremony, but with conviction. That night the garden glowed with string lights and candle jars. Edith had prepared a feast, grilled vegetables from the beds, lemon chicken, crusty bread warm from the oven. Robert and his wife arrived with wine. A few neighbors joined. Even the head of security made an awkward toast that left everyone chuckling. It wasn't a party in the grand sense. No tuxedos, no orchestras, no press. Just people who mattered. At one point, Grayson stood beside Imani, looking out over the yard. Laughter echoed around them. Someone was playing an old jazz record from the porch. Fireflies blinked like tiny constellations. "This isn't the life I planned," he said quietly. "No," she replied, taking his hand. "It's better." He kissed her temple. "Do you regret any of it? The danger, the articles, the chaos?" She looked at him steady. "I regret not meeting you sooner, but I think we found each other exactly when we were supposed to." They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in the hum of the world they were building. Not a palace, not a fortress, a garden. In the weeks that followed, headlines faded. The public moved on. Sloan and Richard's legal threats crumbled under scrutiny. Logan sent a terse apology email that Grayson never replied to. The media, always hungry for fresh drama, turned their attention to newer scandals. Grayson and Imani planned a small wedding beneath the sycamore tree. Edith cried. Robert cried. Even the gardener cried, though he swore it was just allergies. But it was never about the ceremony. It was about the mornings after. The quiet coffee and mismatched mugs, the smell of thyme on their hands, the shared looks across the dinner table, the knowing that they had chosen one another, not in spite of the past, but because of it. Because broken things can be rebuilt. Because some love stories don't begin in youth or fantasy, but in storms and in gardens, and in the quiet bravery of two hearts saying here, now, forever.